Hey everyone, welcome back to the React course. I'm super excited to have you back. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about some common things that are used in React and that are from the JavaScript side. So consider this as a revision if you are already comfortable with JavaScript and you are confident enough to write decent programs. And by decent, I mean using all the modern features that JavaScript provides. And if you are not, then this can serve as a basic work ahead platform, because I'm going to introduce all the major concepts that we are going to use throughout. And if you want to learn those features in detail, you can go ahead and look them up on the internet or just do a Google search and you will find great material. So without any further ado, let's start. Okay, so I am in this React tutorials folder and this lecture 2 folder, and this is the simple Unix terminal. Now I'm going to use Vim for today and I'm going to switch to VS Code after this. Vim, if you don't know, don't get intimidated with it. It's just a command line text editor, and I'm using Vim just because I'm going to run my programs in command line. So I thought there was no point using say VS Code or something. So it's just a text editor, okay, just a normal text editor, and feel free to use Vim or anything like VS Code or Sublime or whatever you feel like. Okay, with that being said, let's start. So I'll create a file called 1.js. okay, now I'm in this file. So first of all, let's discuss how to create variables. So let me write a comment. And in JavaScript, you might know that this is the syntax to write comments. So let's look at how we can create variables. How to create. Okay, so there are three main ways to create variables. One is with var. So if I say var a is equal to 10, it gives me a variable called a that whose value is 10. Then there is something called let, and let b is equal to 10, or let's make it a string. Okay, and then the other one is constant. Const c is equal to, let's call it true. Okay, now that. Okay, one thing I want to tell you that in JavaScript, the booleans true and false start with lowercase letters. So tru is true and fa, this is false, and these are the booleans that represent those. Anything other than this, say capital FALC, is nothing. Okay, good, cool. Now we have three things called a, b and c. Let's just print them to the screen. Console.log, and I can do something like console a, then console log b and console log c, but in JavaScript what you can do is you can pass multiple parameters to this. And if I just save this, and okay, now how I'm going to run this is I'm going to use node. Okay, and if you don't know what node is, just think of this as a program that is going to run my script. And what node does is, node is a JavaScript interpreter, and it will read my code from top to bottom and it will just do as my code instructs it to. So how to do that? You just write node 1.js. okay, so I get these three values. That's what I'm expecting. Good. Now let's go back to 1.js. Now let's explain what's var, let and const. So basically var and let are quite similar, but they have some underlying differences. And traditionally JavaScript used to had var as their variable declaring mechanisms, and let and const were introduced in ECMAScript 2015. So these are the modern JavaScript ways to create variables. Var was available from the beginning. Var is still available, it's not gone anywhere, but it's not advised or ideal for if you don't understand exactly how var and variable scoping works, and that is a totally different topic. So if you want to know more about what are the problems with using var, you should go ahead and look it up online. You will get a lot of material, and I'm not going to dive deep into that, because if I do, this video is going to stretch and we won't be able to discuss all the important topics. So var and let are quite simpler, but I would advise not to use var and just think that there are two constructs available. Now as var is gone, let me explain let and const. Now let gives me a variable and I can assign any value, and const give me necessarily a constant, and what that means is it's just a variable, but upon changing its value it will give an error. So let's try that. So if I say let p be equal to, rather than being 10, let it be this is changed. Okay, and then now if I run this, I should see something different. Now okay, cool. So it gives me an error that a is not defined, and I'm trying to print it by a, but I removed a, so it won't work. So I just have to remove a from here. Once I've done that, if I save this again and go back and run this, then it shows me okay, this is changed and true. Now let's try changing c. C is equal to, now this should give me an error, and it indeed does. And if you read the message, it will be clear what the error is. Assigned to a constant variable. That means you can't change the value of constant variables. This comes in handy when we are using variables that might accidentally change, and we don't want that to happen. Say you are writing an application that has some configuration that is to be done initially when the application loads. Then those configuration parameters are always going to be constant until unless explicitly changed. So you want them not to change throughout the process of the program running, and to make sure that doesn't happen, you can declare them a constant. And if accidentally you ever change those, or accidentally somewhere in your program it gets changed, then it will give you a warning or a heads up before, so that you can go ahead and fix that. Okay, so I'm going to comment that for a while. Now let's look at something else. So this is how to create variables. Now let's look at how to create functions. Now there are two main ways to create functions in JavaScript. First is using the function keyword. Okay, so how you create functions using this is you write function and then you write the name of the function, say my function 1, and then you write parentheses, and your parameters for this function will go here, and then you write curly brackets, and then you say whatever this function is supposed to do. So this was created using function keyword. Sounds good enough? Cool. Let's run this. So to call this, what you need to do is you go back and you see, okay, alright, we see that the function has been called. Now let's see a new way of creating functions. Oh, another thing, what you can do is you can also create anonymous functions, and what that means is it's a function that has no name to it. So you can do something like constant function, or let's say func2 is equal to function, and see how I'm not giving this any name, right? So const.log, this is an unnamed function. Now what I've done is I've created an unnamed function, and that's called anonymous function in JavaScript. And this right here, from here to here, is a function, but it's useless to me if I don't have a reference to this function, because if I don't have a reference to this function, I can't call this. That's why I'm storing the return of this function into a variable called func2. And in JavaScript you can do this, because in JavaScript functions are also treated as higher level objects. In JavaScript necessarily everything is object, a variable, a number, a boolean, object, and function, everything is essentially objects, and you can assign every single type value to variables. This might be confusing, and this is also a core JavaScript thing, so I won't dive deep into this, but just remember that functions can be assigned to variables like this, and this is a common practice that you might see a lot being done. So in this case, what I need to do to call this function is I just have to write it like this. So basically what I did was, instead of writing the name here, I just wrote it here. And there is a difference in these two, but for the sake of our understanding and our learning, we don't need to know that, and we don't need to dive into that. So if you want to learn more deeply this concept, then you should go ahead and check out those and specifically look for something like this and Google it, or find some resources, or go on and watch some explanation video, and yeah, this will boost your JavaScript knowledge. So let's just go back and run this again, and I see that both are being called. Cool. Now these two were previously available in JavaScript before ECMAScript 2016 and 2015 as well. So there is a new syntax that is available to us that's called arrow function, and what those are say I want to create a function, but I don't want to have that hassle of writing this function keyword. So what I can do is I can write constant, or let if you want to. So let f function 3 is equal to, then what I do is I ignore the function keyword completely and I just start with parentheses. Then I have an arrow, and then I write my curly brackets, and inside my curly brackets I can write any JavaScript valid statement. So console.log, this is an arrow function. Now I personally prefer writing arrow functions because they are convenient and they are quick to write. So let me just call this one once and see if it's working, and if it's working, then we are gonna learn more implementations of these. Okay, so I can clearly see this message printed, and that means that whatever I wanted to do worked. So let's go back and let's look at what else we can do, because this one is my personal choice of writing functions and I'm going to use this throughout. So I want you to be comfortable with this, and we are going to practice that right now. So say if you just want to pass one single parameter to this function, then you don't need these parentheses. You can simply ignore them. So say you want to pass this parameter called error to this, and then you want to say that console.log error. Okay, and then when you're calling this function, you pass this is an error. Then it'll say this is an error, and this is what we wanted it to print, and it prints that. Now if you just want to pass one single argument, then the parentheses are optional. In all other cases, parentheses are required. So if you want to say pass 2 arguments, or if you want to pass no arguments, then in both those cases parentheses are required. So let me go back and put those parentheses, as I don't want to pass any parameters, and let me go ahead and remove this statement once. Now if you just want to have a single statement, then these braces are optional, but what I'll recommend is you always write these braces. And if you say want to return something, then just go ahead and return say 1. Okay, and then what I'll do is I also put this in a console.log so we can see what this returns. And if I run this now, you see this one down there, this is the return from that function. So this is the common function declaration syntax that I'm going to use throughout this project and throughout teaching you React. This is really convenient as it's really quick to write. It gives me a cleaner syntax and there is no hassle of writing this function. Also, this gives an advantage of a really crucial problem in JavaScript, that is the scoping of this, and we're going to see that in coming lectures. But using arrow functions completely eliminates that, so you don't have to have that problem anymore because you have a fixed solution. I won't talk about much about that, but if I encounter a practical scenario in coming lectures where I can explain that, I'll take 5 minutes out of and go to a different path and explain to you what that means. Okay, so keeping that away, now let's move to something new. Now Previously, there were no classes prior to ECMAScript 2015 in JavaScript, but now you can create classes. And how you do that is you use this class keyword. Then you write the name of your class. Ideally, the first letter of a class name should be capital. So I'll write my class. And then what you can do is you can write these braces, and then you can write a lot of things here. Okay, so how to declare a constructor if you're coming from object oriented land, and if you're not, then a constructor is just a method that will be called when the object of this class is created. That's like basically, if you think about that in terms of web development, say that is your HTML that runs directly in the browser or any other application. So constructor is the first thing that runs whenever you create an object. So how you write that? You write constructor, and it's a method. So constructor, and then you write all your settings here. Okay, and we are going to look at the syntax in more detail. Let me just put a comment here. Whenever we are going to encounter a practical scenario, and I'm going to tell you how to write more methods inside this, and so on and so forth. Now let me talk to you another important thing, that's called objects. So if I say let obj be an object, then an object in JavaScript is a key value pair. So what you can say is a has a value of 10, and the value corresponding to key B is true, and so on. The value of corresponding to this is, say, hi. Okay, that's enough. So how do you access things out of this object? So if you want to access a key called a, then what you can do is you can just use it like this. So object, the variable name, dot, and then you say whatever you want to access, say a. Sounds good? Now let's just try this. See, we see this value of 10 here, and that is coming from object.a. If you, so that you, let me just comment every other thing so that we just see the outputs from this console.log. Okay, so let's run that again. Fine, we see this 10, and I missed a console.log, so let me just do that 1 second. Okay. These function calls are making that. Fine, we are done rid of everything else, and we just see a 10. Cool. Let's go back to, now say I have a variable, so let variable is equal to b. Now say I have a variable that stores the value of a key that is inside my object. Now this variable, or let me rename this because this might get confusing. So let some key stores a key that's called p, and now I want to access that key from this object. Then the first intuition might be to go ahead and do something like this. And we should try this to see what if it produces a problem or it satisfies our output. It says undefined because what it does is, when you are using this dot syntax, this doesn't take this as a variable and it just converts it as a string. So why it gave undefined is that what it was trying to look is, on this object obj, it was looking to find some key called some key, as in quotes. So how do you use, or how do you do that, handle the scenario of having a variable pointing to some key? What you can do is you can use square brackets rather than using dot. And what this is similar to how you do this on arrays. You have an object and you are trying to bring out this. Using square brackets, what it will do is it will evaluate whatever is written inside the brackets. And I'll come to a complex example just in a second. So if I do this, and if I go back and if I see whatever I wanted, that's what my desired result was. Now let me show you a more complicated scenario. Say I want to do something like, and let me just put some space so that you can see clearly. Now what I'll do is I want to have, now what I'll say is, now this is the JavaScript tertiary operator and I'm gonna write C here, and if it's not the case then I'll write Z maybe or something random. But because I know this is true, I just want to demonstrate that whatever is written inside square brackets gets evaluated and its result is searched over the space. So let me just go back and say, so you can clearly see that the statement was evaluated, and because true equals to true is always true, that's why it always returns C. And on looking up a key called C on the object, we get this JavaScript string called hi, and that's what was printed on the screen. So this is something to remember, that if you want a statement or a variable or anything to be executed, you use the square brackets, and if you want to just simply access a string key, then you can use the dot syntax. And if you ever get confused or get undefined or unexpected results, just switch back to the square bracket statement or syntax, and that will probably remove your error. And if you still can't find that error, you need to like look into it for a little more, and then you'll find your error. Now moving forward, the other thing I want to talk to you about are arrays and operations that you can perform on arrays. So say you have an array called ARR and it has elements called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 7. Okay, whatever. Now there are three main functions that can be executed on arrays, and those are, what you can do is you can map on all the elements of this array. So array.map, and this is a function, and what this function does is it takes a function as an argument, and okay, this takes a function as argument. Now it will pass two things to this. First it will pass the data, and the other thing it will pass is the index. And what you can do is you can console this to see console.log data on index. Okay, let me just take this opportunity and introduce you to something new in JavaScript, that are template strings. So to create a template string, what you do is you write these texts. Now these are not single text and backticks or double text, these are called backticks, and these are under escape probably on your keyboard. So you write these, and then you can write any string statement. Say this is the data at index. Now what I want to do is I want to have this index and data come from these variables index and data. So if you want to access JavaScript variables inside this syntax, what you need to do is you need to write a $, then an open square bracket and a closing bracket or brace, sorry. You do the same with index, and yeah. So having the ability to write variables using this syntax inside a string is provided to us by these backticks, and this is called template tutorials, and we are going to talk about these in greater detail when we are building our React applications and wherever they encounter a use case for these. So let me just go back and run the program again, and you can see that this is 1 at index 0 and so on and so forth. Now this map function takes a function as an argument, and this right here what I'm using is an arrow function. So this starts the function, this is the first argument, this is second argument, I bring that arrow in, and here are my curly brackets. There are two more methods, and I'm going to talk to you about one right now, and the other one we'll look at when we encounter a use case for. Other method is called filter, and it also has data and index to it. And what that does is it's used to filter data. So what you can do is you can either return true or false, and based on that the elements or the condition that return true are only kept into the array and all other things are removed. Now mind you that filter creates a new array, it doesn't modify the actual array in hand, so you need to create another variable called array2 and store this results into this. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if the data coming to me is greater than 5. If so, I'm going to return true. Else, in all cases, and if I just have to do one else, then I don't read it, so I can just directly say return false. Okay, so what should happen is all the entries that don't have values greater than 5 should be removed. And to verify that, what I'll do is I'll console array2 and let's look what happens. So as you can clearly see that what elements do we have? We have 1, we have 3, we have 4, then we have 56, and then we have 7. As only 56 and 7 are greater than 5, so in the new array only those are available. These are very convenient, and we are going to use these to an extreme level in our applications and applying our skills on the React side. Understanding these will give you a really good advantage in the upcoming things. If you have understood the syntax, or if you haven't actually and you mind playing with it, please go ahead and play with it so that you become comfortable. And when we are doing React, you only have to learn React, and syntax won't spoil your state. On that note, I'll take your leave for today and I'll hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back.